Good afternoon and welcome to the Brazos River Authority's Brown Bag on the Brazos. I'm Judy Pierce, Public Information Officer for the BRA and your host for today's virtual town hall meeting. We have two guests joining us today. Aaron Abel will be telling us about exactly how much rain we had over the past month and how that's affected lake levels and water supply for the rest of the summer and going into the fall months as well. And Charlie Sugart will tell us a bit about a new project to help inform you about projects and programs taking place in the Brazos River Basin. And as always, if there are any questions, we'll answer them at the end of our presentation. So a little bit of housekeeping first. Part of the purpose of being here today is to allow you to ask questions of the BRA. So at any time during our presentation today, you can ask a question by typing it into the chat function. You'll find that icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. And if we don't get to your question, you can send us an email at information@brazos.org and we'll respond to you in writing. So it's my pleasure to welcome back Aaron Abel, our Water Services Manager. Aaron, it's been a really hot and wet summer, very unusual for us. In fact, one of the weathermen in the Waco area had said it was the 7th wettest July ever on record. So what have we been seeing throughout the basin?
Well, we've been seeing a lot of rain, especially over the last 2 months, and parts of the basin early in the spring, saw a lot of rain, and we've had releases going on from PK and Granbury and Limestone for an extended period of time. I wanted to show this graphic. So this is a 60-day or a 2-month observed precipitation map from the National Weather Service, and this is as of August 5th. So going back 2 months, so that's early June. So roughly what we received in June and July, and which is roughly the summer so far. You'll see the legend on the left, and there's some really warm reddish and yellow colors that show the amount of rainfall that was received over these 2-month period. And so most of the basin, a large portion from the Lake Whitney area and the central part of the basin and downstream saw really 10 to 20 inches of rain, for the most part. But we also saw some other places with more rain than that.
Right.
And, you can see also in the red, and that's upstream of Lakes Belton, Stillhouse Hollow, and Georgetown, saw anywhere from 20 to possibly 30 inches over these 2-month periods. And, honestly, that is almost the amount of rain that typically falls over a year. Typically, we get around 35 to 40 inches in this part of the basin. So
that's amazing.
We have seen a lot of rain over the last 2 months.
So does this rank higher than the 7th wettest, as they said, for McLennan County?
In parts of the basin, absolutely, and especially in the Little River system upstream of Belton and Stillhouse Hollow and Georgetown. We saw some pretty significant flooding, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And as far as the departure from normal, and so this is a map that and this has a lot other colors in here, and the purples and blues represent above normal rainfall. And so this is again looking at the 2-month departure from normal precipitation. So typically, over most of the basin, and particularly in the central part of the basin, we receive about 5 inches of rain over the last 2 months, in typical Junes and Julys over that period. Well, a lot of the area saw more than 8 inches above that, and some areas even saw 15 inches above normal in parts of upstream of Georgetown and Granger and western Williamson County, parts of Burnett County, in the Little River system. So, the legend here, the purples represent above normal, and you can see most of the state, in the hill country, and we saw the catastrophic flooding that occurred in parts of the hill country, including Williamson County. This is the result of that, and I did have particularly looking at the July 4th weekend, because I know, we saw some significant flooding over that weekend, and we developed from the National Weather Service the observed rainfall over the 3 days, includes July 3rd through the 6th. And really, this is where, we saw some places receive upwards of 15 to almost 20 inches of rain in 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And, from July 4th into July 5th. And that did cause some very high increases in stream flow, which flowed in to Lake Georgetown and Lake Granger and Belton and Stillhouse. And so the San Gabriel above Georgetown and above Granger, we saw significant inflows. And those reservoirs, particularly Georgetown, was really low at that time.
Right.
And we saw lake level increases of above 25 feet and really about 24 hours.
Wow. So the Lake Georgetown came up 25 feet.
Yes.
In 24 hours.
Yeah.
And how long had it been that low?
So Lake Georgetown had not been full since July of 2019.
2019.
So, that this was a prolonged drought for that part of the basin, particularly in the Georgetown area. And so typically what happens, and it doesn't happen all the time, but droughts are broken by very extreme flood events.
That. Yeah. Is that normal? It's kind of a saying or a joke here that most of the droughts end with heavy duty flash flooding. Is that always the case?
It's not always the case, but in many cases it is. And, if you look back to the significant droughts that we've had, dating back to the 50s, in the 50s drought, that was broken by significant flood events in May of 57. The drought that spanned from 2011 through 2015, that was particularly centered in the central and upper part of the basin, that ended with some very extreme rainfall and flood events in the May to April timeframe of 2015. So, but there are other droughts where we didn't see as much in the way of flood events, but in many cases it is the case. So as far as stream flow goes, and I wanted to put this graphic just in the context, and there's a lot of information on this graphic, and what you're seeing here in the upper right is the state of Texas, the Brazos River Basin, and then a rectangular box. We've increased the resolution, if you will, and we're showing primarily the Lampasas, Little River, San Gabriel, and Leon watersheds that typically flow into Stillhouse Hollow, Lake Georgetown, and Lake Granger. So the San Gabriel is broken up between the North Fork and the South Fork. North Fork flows into Lake Georgetown. The South Fork flows into Lake Granger, and then you'll see in the Lampasas watershed, the Lampasas River flows into Stillhouse Hollow.
Right.
And I've pointed out 3 different USGS gauge locations that have a pretty long period of record outside of the North Fork at San Gabriel at Ronald Reagan Boulevard. The Lampasas River at Kempner and the South Fork San Gabriel at Georgetown, they have a pretty long period of record. And when I say period of record, that means data has been gathered for a long period of time. And so looking at the Lampasas River, the July 13th event, the peak gauge height, so the gauge measures the river height at that location, measured 33.2 feet. And that was the 6th highest peak on record.
Oh, wow.
The highest was in 1873.
Oh my gosh.
And so the next highest peak was in the 90s. So this was the largest flood event we've seen in the Lampasas roughly over the last 35 years. Now, going down to the San Gabriel, the North Fork San Gabriel upstream of Georgetown, it has a relatively shorter period of record that dates back to 2008. This was the highest peak on record, with a river height of about 26.3 feet and a peak discharge of over 24,000 CFS. And that's what caused Lake Georgetown to fill up so rapidly.
Okay.
And then finally, you have the South Fork of the San Gabriel that flows through parts of Liberty Hill and Round Rock, and then finally in Georgetown, and finally flows into Lake Granger. And that was the second highest peak on record. So the highest on record was in April of '56, when none of these reservoirs were built, and the peak discharge was 56,600 CFS. So, that caused pretty rapid lake level rise at Lake Granger. So, this event was significant, and obviously caused damage in parts of the basin. And honestly, it's something that, as you mentioned, it does happen, and it'll continue to happen, unfortunately. But the flood waters that were created, did replenish the reservoirs, and we're in pretty good shape in terms of water supply.
Right. So we're pretty much full right now. I want to say the last time I looked, we were at 99% full of our water supply system. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. And this is our reservoir status graphic, as we typically show. And you're right, we're at 99% full. About 1.9 million acre feet of water is being stored across 11 reservoirs. And obviously, we have PK, Granbury, and Limestone. Those are 3 water supply reservoirs. And we have 8 other multi-purpose core reservoirs that they're water supply, but they're also flood control. And, they greatly reduce the amount of flood damage downstream of these reservoirs in this event, many events prior to this. And so you can see we track the 2-week % change and drawdown, 2-week change and drawdown in the upper right hand corner. And one thing you'll notice is some of the core reservoirs are decreasing, but they're still full in terms of water supply.
Right. So there's a couple out there that are over 100% full. So what does that mean? So
in these multi-purpose reservoirs, and what I'm talking about is the core reservoirs. They're flood control reservoirs, and they're unlike our BRA reservoirs, right? So they have large amounts of storage above the conservation, so that they can accept the flood water and retain that flood water when the flood event occurs, and then gradually, slowly release that flood water over the course of many weeks. And that's actually what happened in this scenario. So, we're early August right now. Our peak, and when I say peak, the Corps' peak flood control volume that they held back in July was around 330,000 acre feet.
Oh.
So that's how much water that was being retained and stored in the flood control pool, letting the rivers downstream subside. And then the Corps looks at different points downstream to determine when they can start releasing water from their reservoirs in the flood control pool slowly. And so they've been doing that for the last, month or so. And so Lake Belton, Lake Stillhouse Hollow, Lake Granger and Lake Georgetown and Aquila and a little bit of Proctor are still slightly into the flood pool, and some of those reservoirs are slowly making releases, and will so probably for the next week or so. And so folks downstream, towards the outlet, towards the lower basin, they've noticed over the last 4 to 6 weeks, elevated river levels, and that's normal.
So for this time of year, the flows are normally fairly low because they're dry
exactly.
and hot. But now people downstream are seeing higher river levels because of the core lakes.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes. And so it's not normal to have this much water in August, but it is normal for the Corps to operate as they do and retain the flood waters and slowly release that water. And a lot of these reservoirs, all the core reservoirs, in the historical record, BRA supported those, and they do a great benefit, just not both for water supply, but also flood control. And so we're not in any drought conditions right now, and that's a good thing, especially for this time of year.
Do you happen to remember where we were this time of year last year?
We did have some drought declarations, I think, in place this time last year, especially related to Stillhouse and Georgetown. And so, like I said, Georgetown it had not been full since 2019, July 2019. So, that is a good thing where we are right now. Now, looking forward, I know a lot of folks are wondering, kind of transitioning. Well, we're about to transition, hopefully, from the hot summer months to, September, October, and that transition period. So what do we expect from a precipitation outlook? And, we look at these graphics, and this is from from NOAA, from National Weather Service, and they produce monthly seasonal precipitation outlooks that span for the next 3 months. So this is valid for August, September, October, and this was released in July, mid-July. And you'll see the greens and the tans. The greens represent areas that have probabilities of above normal rainfall over these 3 months. And so this is an average. And then the tans and the browns that represent below normal probability, or lower probabilities or higher probabilities for below normal rainfall. Sorry, that's a tongue twister. And then you see this equal chances swath, and really, and that includes all of Texas. And so what that means that there's not a particular driving factor that swings the Texas area one way or the other in terms of below normal or above normal rainfall. So
isn't October normally a fairly wet month for us?
It is. It typically is. Sometimes, starting in September, we could start seeing more significant cold fronts, and typically, you have the Gulf moisture in place, and that colder, drier air abutting next to that warmer moisture air typically produces rainfall, thunderstorms, and with our reservoirs relatively full, we potentially can see some additional releases, going forward in the fall if we, see some additional rain. And then going forward, we always look at the seasonal drought outlook, and that kind of folds into what we saw in the previous slide. And, honestly, there's in the Brazos River Basin, there's no drought, and no drought expected, in the tendency towards the end of October. Now, you'll see in the South Texas area around San Antonio, they were right on the edge and didn't receive the rainfall that most everybody else received over the last 2 months, and they're still in some pretty extreme drought, kind of between San Antonio to Corpus. But we're in a good shape, and the outlook, looks pretty good. So
for the next several months.
For the next several months.
So as we go into 2026, we should stay fairly full as in all of our lakes, and then in the spring, we are good and set for water supply, but good and set for recreation on the lakes too, with them being so full. Yeah,
typically, over the winter months, we typically don't see much fluctuation in lake levels. And so, I mean, what we have in late October, September is probably pretty much what we're going to have through the winter, and setting us up pretty well for 2026.
That's great. Well, good news. And thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. And hopefully we'll be able to keep everybody in the loop with our upcoming projects, rather than the brown bag on the Brazos. So thank you for being a part of it, and for letting us know what we have to look forward to in the future.
Good.
All right. Well, thank you, Aaron. We appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to remind our parents and grandparents out there that even though the start of the school year is very close, and in some cases has already begun, there's still quite a bit of warm weather left this summer. So we'd like to help you teach your little ones about water safety. And we have a coloring book that we would be happy to help you do that. These books help the kids learn how to be careful and responsible around water. And we'd be happy to send them to you if you'd like to have one for your kids or grandkids. So just send us an email with your name to information@brazos.org, and we'll be happy to drop one in the mail for you. Okay, so for those of you that have not heard this, this is our last episode of this series, Brown Bag on the Brazos, being live streamed. We began this virtual town hall meeting back in April of 2021 when we were still under some COVID restrictions, and we did that to help everyone know where we were during the shutdown period. And now we're kind of back to normal, and I think everyone will be very happy to say goodbye to any type of live stream meetings at this point. So we're adapting and making some changes to how we provide information to the public. So with that in mind, I'm very pleased to welcome Charlie Schugert, who will tell us a little bit about the new direction that we're moving in and how we're going to provide you with information in the future at your convenience and available anytime you need your information. So welcome back, Charlie.
Thanks.
Charlie is our Assistant Public Information Officer, and she's here to talk a little bit about the new and very exciting program we have for the BRA, and that's a podcast. So, Charlie, I know that most people know what a podcast is. So why are we doing a podcast?
I think a big thing that we do here at the organization is we try and find ways to get people information about what we're doing, our product lines, how rain is impacting different portions of the basin in a way that is most convenient and easily accessible to them. So, we do that now through several different ways. We update our website every week with a new educational article. We have multiple different social media pages where we work on sharing different information that's out there. We have a speakers bureau where people can come and share information to community groups. And we have an email newsletter article that we send out with detailed information. And so I feel like this is a good natural transition into an avenue that is going to reach people in another way that is accessible to them on a platform that's already really popular for people.
And it's at their convenience as well, rather than being like this is a live stream meeting on a Thursday at noon. They would be able to access that information at any time. So
Absolutely.
So what are we calling it?
Unpacking the Brazos River, as you'll see here on the graphic.
Okay, and why unpacking the Brazos?
When we think about unpacking, we're thinking about, not looking at a row of items. We're looking at taking apart something piece by piece and looking at the layers and really digesting what it is. So that's what we're doing with this. We are taking different topics of things that we're involved in, things that affect people in the Brazos Basin, and really just exploring it to deeper levels. So unpacking.
So how will a podcast be different than this Brown Bag on the Brazos?
Well, you mentioned convenience and accessibility. This is something that people can listen to anytime at their leisure. If you're cooking or doing laundry or working out, and maybe you can only listen to half of it at a time. Really something that is at people's convenience.
Okay. Well, what are some of the topics we're going to be talking about, and who will be appearing as a guest?
Yeah, so we are just going to have a wide variety of guests. Of course, our general manager and CEO, David Collinsworth, will be joining us. Early on, he's going to talk about Texas water rights, what that is, what that means, how that affects what we do. Our Deputy General Manager, Matt Phillips, our Chief Environmental Officer, Tiffany Malzahn, and then a wide variety of people from our lakes, our wastewater treatment plants, water services, just a variety of people who are the experts in their field who can share with everyone about the topics that we're going to have. So topics, I mentioned Texas water rights. We'll talk a little bit about why you shouldn't dump your fish tank into the lake and why that matters. We can talk about, why lake levels fluctuate. what it is we do here at the BRA. I think we've got a wide variety of things from episode to episode to help keep everybody informed.
Okay, can you give us a little bit of preview? What's our first topic going to be?
The first, well, so we're going to have a teaser. General Manager and CEO David Collinsworth is going to introduce the podcast as a whole. But then the first episode is diving into why you shouldn't dump your fish tank into the lake or, or the river. Yeah.
Talking about some environmental.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So I understand that we have some original music to go along with our podcast.
Yeah, so Clay Sellers is a lab analyst here at the BRA in our environmental department. And you will hear this when you listen to the podcast episodes, but he is singing and playing the guitar.
Awesome.
And we're so excited about it. He did an amazing job. It just sounds great. And I'd love to note that someone else in our environmental department, Courtney Sanders, took the picture that is on our graphic that we're using.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So when will the podcast be available?
So the official launch is September. If you happen to go looking for it, you will see that the teaser is out there
Okay.
as we start getting ready. But come September, we will have episodes ready for everyone to listen to.
So where can people find our podcast?
So many places. So YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, Pocket Cast, and many other different locations. And we will, of course, share those episodes every time they come out on our social media platforms as a reminder and easy access to find it.
All right. Okay, so during this brown bag, we know that people can ask questions. So what happens if somebody listens to the podcast and decides they'd like to know more, or they have questions that they'd like to ask? How can they go about doing that?
Oh, reach out. So at the end of every podcast episode, we end it with what our email address is so you can reach us. Of course, when we share these episodes on our social media pages, you can comment there or send us direct messages. But yeah, I want to make sure when the episode ends and you have more questions, or we didn't touch on something, that you can reach out to us and we can share more information.
Wonderful. That is great. Well, let's take a look at that graphic one more time, unpacking the Brazos River. So wherever you all go to listen to your podcasts, you can just type in the search function, look for Brazos River Authority, and you'll see this graphic. So when you see that, it's us, and we hope that you all will enjoy it or will join us and enjoy the podcast. So thank you very much for coming and talking to us about the podcast.
Absolutely.
Unpacking the Brazos River. So, all right. Do we have any questions today from our live audience? No, nothing there? All right. Well, if you do have questions after hearing this presentation, if you have questions at all, you can give us a call or you can just email us at information@brazos.org, and we'll be happy to answer those questions for you. So this slide brings us to an end of our series, The Brown Bag on the Brazos. We appreciate everyone who's taken the time to come out of their busy day to join us to learn a little bit more about the Brazos River Authority and see some of the faces that care for the basin. I'd like to thank a few people who have made the virtual town hall meetings possible, including our General Manager and CEO, David Collinsworth, and the BRA management team, who are always very supportive of our educational efforts. And thanks to our IT department, especially James Matus, who's been an outstanding producer for these meetings. And thank you all for joining us for these bi-monthly meetings. And just a really quick shout out to Mrs. Margaret Collinsworth, who I understand is a regular member of our audience, and your presence was much appreciated. We look forward to our new podcast dropping in September and hope that you will all look for it on Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts, and join us there. I've had a preview and they're pretty good. So for now, thank you for being a part of our Brown Bag on the Brazos, and have a great afternoon.